Hello and welcome. The Sword Coast stretches for hundreds of miles along the western edge of Faerun, where countless generations have built their lives upon the shore. But what you see from the docks of Waterdeep or the cliffs of Baldur's Gate represents only half the story. Beneath these familiar waters lie the remnants of civilizations claimed by the sea. Places where stone streets still wind through darkness, and empty windows gaze up toward a surface they will never reach again. These are not mere shipwrecks scattered by storms. Based on archaeological evidence and historical records, complete settlements rest on the ocean floor, preserved by salt and pressure, and the cold mercy of the deep. The ocean keeps its secrets well. Unlike surface ruins that crumble under wind and rain, underwater structures can maintain their shapes for centuries. Stone buildings stand almost as they did when their inhabitants last walked through them, though now fish swim through doorways where people once passed. The water itself becomes a curator, a guardian of history. Eels make homes in what were once living quarters. Crabs scuttle across mosaics that took artisans years to complete, and in the darkest depths, where light never penetrates, even stranger things have made these ruins their domain. The Sword Coast earned its name from more than just the shape of the shoreline. This region has seen countless wars, invasions, magical catastrophes, and divine interventions throughout its long history. Each of these events left their mark not just on the land, but also on the sea. When the spell plague tore through Faerun in the year of blue fire, 1385 Dale reckoning, warping reality itself, coastal regions experienced devastating effects. The blue flames that manifested during Mystra's death interacted unpredictably with large bodies of water, and historical records from survivors describe entire sections of coastline transformed or submerged in moments. You need to understand that these sunken places were not always underwater. They began as thriving communities filled with life. Fishermen would bring in their daily catch to bustling markets. Merchants would haggle over the price of silk and spices. Children would play while their parents conducted business. Priests would call the faithful to prayer in temples dedicated to gods, both good and evil. The transition from surface to sea rarely came gently. And when it did, it left behind structures that tell stories of those final moments. The earliest known settlements along the Sword Coast date back tens of thousands of years to when elves dominated much of Faerun. The ancient elven kingdom of Alefarn stretched along the Sword Coast during this distant age, a realm whose influence shaped the region for millennia. While Alefarn itself was primarily a surface kingdom, coastal settlements connected to it would have existed where major cities now stand. Archaeological evidence suggests that some of these early coastal sites now rest beneath the waves, though the specific circumstances of their submersion remain subjects of scholarly debate. Escarl stands as perhaps the most well-documented sunken city in the region. This elven settlement, located off the northern shores in the Purple Rocks area, became known as the Sunken City. Historical records confirm its existence and its eventual fate beneath the waves. Though the exact date and cause of its submersion are less clear from surviving documents, what we do know suggests that Ascarl was a significant elven community that, for reasons lost to time, found itself claimed by the ocean. The city would later gain new significance as the capital of an undersea empire. But that story belongs to later discussions of underwater civilizations. As human civilizations began to spread along the Sword Coast, they too built coastal cities, and they too sometimes lost them to the sea. The settlement of Luskan, still thriving today, has seen portions of its districts collapse into the harbor over the centuries. Historical records document instances where poor construction on unstable ground, combined with violent storms, sent entire neighborhoods sliding into the water. These losses, while tragic, were not uncommon for cities built directly on coastlines where geology and weather patterns created ongoing risks. The relationship between land and sea along the Sword Coast has always been dynamic. Earthquakes, while not constant, occur with enough frequency that most major cities have experienced at least minor tremors during their histories. When these earthquakes strike offshore, they can generate waves large enough to devastate coastal communities. Survivors' accounts from various disasters throughout history describe walls of water appearing on the horizon, growing impossibly tall as they approach shore, then smashing through everything in their path. Not all coastal settlements sank suddenly. Some experienced gradual descent that took decades or even centuries. Geological studies of the Sword Coast reveal that certain areas built on sedimentary rock or unstable foundations have slowly subsided over time. Residents of affected areas would first notice flooding at high tide becoming more frequent and more severe. Eventually, the lower elevations would flood permanently, forcing people to abandon their homes or adapt by building upward. This pattern has repeated itself multiple times throughout the region's history, creating a scattered collection of partially or fully submerged settlements along the coast. Myths and legends about sunken cities have always been popular along the Sword Coast. Sailors tell stories to pass time during long voyages, and tales of underwater realms filled with treasure and danger make for compelling entertainment. While many of these stories contain significant embellishment, they often originate from real events that have been transformed through countless retellings. A settlement that featured extensive use of glass in its architecture might become a legend about a city made entirely of crystal. Natural sounds created by water flowing through ruined structures could evolve into tales of buildings that sing. The most persistent legends involve cities that supposedly remain perfectly preserved beneath the waves, sometimes described as existing in bubbles of air or frozen in time. credible archaeological evidence supports the existence of such places in the literal sense described by folklore. However, these legends likely derive from the very real phenomenon of deep underwater ruins maintaining remarkable structural integrity. When divers explore sites at significant depth, they sometimes find buildings that look almost exactly as they did when occupied, creating the impression of a frozen moment in time that could easily inspire exaggerated tales. Real sunken sites along the Sword Coast, while perhaps less fantastical than legend suggests, possess their own form of magic. There's something profoundly moving about swimming through submerged structures and imagining the people who once used them. A building that once served as a marketplace still has its layout visible, allowing reconstruction of how vendors arranged their stalls. A temple maintains its dignity underwater, columns rising toward a surface far above. The archaeological value of these sites cannot be overstated, as they preserve aspects of daily life that surface ruins cannot. The preservation of underwater sites depends largely on their depth and the nature of the ocean floor where they rest. Settlements that sank into relatively shallow water, less than 100 feet deep, tend to deteriorate more rapidly. Currents are stronger at these depths, constantly battering structures. Storms can churn up the water violently, toppling weakened buildings. Marine life is more abundant near the surface, with various organisms that can break down both organic and inorganic materials over time. Deeper sites, those resting 200 feet down or more, often remain better preserved. The pressure at these depths helps compact sediment around structures, essentially burying and protecting them. Currents are generally weaker, reducing erosion. Less light means less plant growth. The cold water also slows decomposition of any remaining organic materials. Some deep sites look almost as they did the day they sank, though covered in silt and colonized by deep sea organisms that don't significantly damage the underlying structures. The truly deep sites, those beyond 500 feet, enter a realm that few surface dwellers ever witness. At these depths, darkness becomes absolute. The pressure would crush most surface creatures instantly. Strange life forms dwell here, adapted to conditions that would seem alien in the sunlight. Yet, even in this hostile environment, structures endure. Their stone and metal components last almost indefinitely, slowly being incorporated into the ocean floor itself. Over thousands of years, these ruins might become the foundation for geological formations, their artificial origins eventually becoming indistinguishable from natural rock. You might wonder why these sunken settlements matter. Why should anyone care about ruins on the ocean floor when there are so many immediate concerns on the surface? The answer lies in understanding history and learning from the past. Every submerged site represents evidence of civilizations that once thrived exactly where we build our own cities today. The people who built these communities believed they would last, invested their wealth and labor in creating something enduring, and yet the ocean claimed them. These underwater ruins also serve as irreplaceable historical archives. On land, abandoned cities are quickly looted, their valuable items taken, their buildings repurposed or destroyed for materials. Weather erodes inscriptions and damages artwork. But underwater, protected by depth and the dangers of diving, artifacts remain in context. A simple clay pot sitting on a shelf in a submerged house might be the only surviving example of a particular pottery style from that era. Documents sealed in waterproof containers could contain the only copies of certain texts. Religious items left in temples might be the sole remaining evidence of how particular deities were worshipped in specific time periods. As you consider the settlements scattered beneath the Sword Coast, remember that each one was home to real people with real lives. They loved and hated, succeeded and failed, dreamed and despaired, just like people do today. Their cities may have sunk, but their stories remain, waiting in the dark water to be discovered and understood. And perhaps most importantly, their fate reminds us that the coast we walk today is not permanent. The cities we build may one day rest beneath the waves as well, becoming the mysteries for future generations to explore and wonder about. The ocean doesn't forget, it preserves. And in those submerged streets and darkened buildings lie fragments of the Sword Coast's history, a parallel record existing in watery darkness, waiting for those brave or knowledgeable enough to seek it out and interpret what they find. Section 2. Cataclysms and coastal catastrophes. The forces that send cities beneath the waves rarely announce themselves with warning. Sometimes disaster arrives in the form of a single violent moment, an earthquake that splits the ground, or a wave that rises impossibly high. Other times, catastrophe unfolds over days or weeks, giving people just enough time to understand what's happening, but not enough to stop it. The Sword Coast has witnessed various forms of coastal destruction throughout its long history, each event leaving its own pattern of ruins on the ocean floor. The year of blue fire stands as perhaps the most devastating period in Faerun's recorded history. When Sirik murdered Mystra, the goddess of magic, her death sent shockwaves through the weave itself. Magic became unpredictable, dangerous, wild. The spell plague erupted across the world in 1385 Dale reckoning, manifesting as writhing blue flames that consumed and transformed everything they touched. Coastal regions suffered particularly severe effects because the spell plague interacted strangely with large bodies of water, creating phenomena that defied all natural law. Along portions of the Sword Coast, the spell plague's effects varied dramatically from location to location. Historical accounts from survivors describe areas where blue fire swept through like a sentient thing, transforming the very nature of reality. Buildings didn't simply collapse or burn in conventional ways. Instead, they twisted into impossible shapes before disappearing or being displaced entirely. The water itself turned strange colors in some locations, while specific details of which exact settlements were lost remain scattered across various historical texts. The overall pattern suggests widespread coastal transformation during this catastrophic period. When the spell plague finally subsided in affected regions, coastlines had been completely redrawn in some areas. Where structures once stood, there was sometimes only open water. The spell plague's touch left certain underwater zones permanently altered, creating locations where normal physics no longer fully applied. This could explain why some divers exploring particular ruins report structures that seem to exist in states of flux, with walls that appear solid one moment and translucent the next, or doorways that lead to spaces that shouldn't fit within a building's exterior dimensions. The spell plague wasn't the Sword Coast's only source of catastrophe. Centuries earlier, the fall of Nethril had consequences that rippled across the entire continent. When the flying cities of Nethril came crashing down during negative 339 Dale reckoning, their impact created earthquakes felt hundreds of miles away. Based on what we know about the magnitude of these impacts, coastal settlements along the Sword Coast would have experienced massive tsunamis triggered by these distant catastrophes. Waves that traveled across entire seas before reaching shore with devastating force. The ancient elven kingdom of Alefarn occupied strategic positions along the Sword Coast for thousands of years before its eventual decline. This realm, which existed long before human settlements dominated the region, would have included coastal communities positioned at river mouths and natural harbors. Given the various catastrophic events that have struck the Sword Coast over millennia, including earthquakes, magical disasters, and natural phenomena, it stands to reason that some of Alefarn's coastal holdings now rest beneath the waves. Archaeological surveys have located ruins that predate known human civilizations, suggesting these may be remnants of ancient elven settlements. Not all coastal disasters stemmed from magical sources. The Sword Coast's geography makes it naturally vulnerable to certain types of catastrophic events. The region sits along areas where geological forces create ongoing seismic activity. Most of the time, this geological process occurs gradually, causing minor tremors that people barely notice. But occasionally, stress builds up to critical levels, and the resulting earthquake can reshape entire coastlines in moments. When earthquakes strike offshore, beneath the ocean floor, they can generate tsunamis of tremendous power. The seafloor displacement pushes massive amounts of water upward, creating waves that travel at high speeds across open ocean. These waves might measure only a few feet tall in deep water, making them nearly invisible to ships. But as they approach shore and encounter shallower depths. They compress and rise dramatically, sometimes reaching heights of 40 feet or more by the time they strike land. Historical records from various coastal cities along the Sword Coast document tsunami events. Though the dates and specific locations vary across different sources, these disasters typically arrive in series, with multiple waves striking over a period of hours. The first wave often causes the most damage simply because it catches people unprepared. Subsequent waves, while sometimes smaller, prove deadly to survivors who return too quickly to check on property or search for loved ones. Coastal communities built on relatively flat terrain with little natural protection suffer worst from tsunami impacts. The waves sweep across towns completely, reaching far inland before finally losing momentum. Buildings constructed near the waterfront often simply cease to exist, reduced to scattered debris and foundations. Structures further inland may survive the initial impact, but still sustain severe damage from the force of churning water carrying debris, ships torn from moorings, and anything else the wave collected during its inland surge. Divine wrath has also played a role in coastal disasters throughout history. The goddess Umberlee, known as the Bitch Queen and the Queen of the Depths, demands respect and offerings from all who travel her domain, while clergy of other faiths might dismiss tales of Umberlee personally destroying cities as exaggeration. There exist documented cases where her priests called down devastating storms. Whether these storms represent direct divine intervention or simply the natural exercise of clerical weather magic remains a matter of theological debate. But the destructive results are undeniable. Cities that outlawed Umberlee worship or failed to show proper reverence risked facing her anger. Priests of the goddess warned that disrespect would not be tolerated, and historical accounts suggest that some settlements that ignored these warnings subsequently experienced catastrophic weather events. Storms would hover over specific locations for days, while surrounding regions remained calm. Rainfall would exceed any previously recorded amounts. Storm surges would push seawater far inland, turning low-lying districts into saltwater lakes. In extreme cases, the combination of saturated earth, constant hammering from rainfall, and the weight of accumulated water caused widespread ground subsidence. Entire neighborhoods could drop 10 to 20 feet almost instantaneously when underlying soil finally gave way. This sudden collapse would create inlets where none had existed before, allowing the ocean to rush in and permanently claim areas that had been above water. Whether such events represented genuine divine punishment or simply the predictable results of extreme weather combined with poor urban planning, the outcome remained the same for the cities involved. Gradual subsidence has claimed settlements as well, though these cases develop over much longer timeframes. Geological surveys along the Sword Coast reveal that certain coastal areas experience slow, steady sinking as underlying rock compresses or as sediment consolidates under weight. Cities built on such foundations can drop a few inches per year, an amount barely noticeable in the short term, but accumulating significantly over decades and centuries. Residents of slowly sinking communities adapt in creative ways. Buildings get constructed with multiple levels, and as lower floors flood, people simply move upstairs and seal entrances to submerged areas. Streets require constant maintenance, being raised and repaved regularly to stay above water level. Eventually, some settlements develop multiple layers, with the oldest construction existing as underwater basements beneath the active city above. This arrangement can remain stable for several generations, with communities functioning in a hybrid surface and underwater state. However, the rate of subsidence sometimes accelerates unexpectedly due to changes in groundwater levels, additional weight from new construction, or shifts in underlying geology. When this happens, what had been a slow, manageable descent can become a rapid plunge, forcing populations to evacuate as their homes slip permanently beneath the waves. War has contributed to the collection of sunken settlements, though less frequently than natural or magical disasters. During various military conflicts throughout the Sword Coast's history, forces have deliberately destroyed coastal fortifications to prevent them from being captured by enemies. Demolition efforts sometimes triggered unintended consequences, with explosions or structural damage causing larger collapses than planned. In rare cases, entire defensive positions ended up underwater when their foundations gave way. The deliberate flooding of city districts has occasionally served defensive purposes. When faced with overwhelming enemy forces, desperate defenders have opened floodgates or breached seawalls, channeling ocean water into streets and buildings to create barriers between valuable city cores and approaching armies. While these tactics sometimes succeeded in preventing immediate conquest, they also rendered large sections of cities permanently uninhabitable, creating new underwater zones that were never reclaimed. Misguided magical experiments have resulted in unintended submersions. Powerful wizards attempting to demonstrate their abilities or achieve ambitious goals have cast spells with catastrophic unintended effects. Magic designed to raise land from the seafloor might instead cause existing land to sink. Attempts to redirect water flow could breach natural barriers that had held back the ocean. The annals of magical history contain numerous cautionary tales about such failures, though specific details often remain vague, possibly because surviving mages had little interest in documenting their most spectacular mistakes. Climate variations over centuries have gradually altered coastlines throughout Faerun. Sea levels have risen and fallen multiple times during the world's long history, influenced by magical catastrophes, divine interventions, and natural climatic cycles. Ancient maps showing the Sword Coast from different eras reveal significant differences in where land meets sea, with some historical shorelines now submerged and others exposed. These gradual changes occurred over such long time frames that populations typically migrated away slowly rather than experiencing sudden disasters. But the ruins remain, silent testaments to how coastlines shift across ages. The pattern repeats throughout history. Settlements rise, flourish, and sometimes fall. The ocean receives them when they do, indifferent to their wealth, their culture, their achievements. Stone buildings become homes for fish. Grand boulevards become paths for eels. Temples stand empty in the darkness. And yet, there's a strange beauty in this transformation, a reminder that nothing lasts forever, that change remains the only constant. Every submerged settlement along the Sword Coast represents countless individual tragedies. Behind each collapsed building lie stories of families separated, lives ended, dreams destroyed. Historical records focus on casualty counts and property damage estimates, but those numbers represent real people, each with their own hopes and fears. Their stories deserve remembering, even if we can no longer know their names or the details of their lives. Section 3. The Sahuagin Kingdoms and Underwater Empires. When cities sink beneath the waves, they don't remain empty for long. The ocean claims these spaces, and with that claim comes new inhabitants, new purposes, new civilizations rising from the ruins of the old. What surface dwellers built on land becomes the foundation for societies that exist entirely underwater. Creatures for whom the depths represent home rather than hostile territory. The most prominent of these underwater civilizations, the Sahuagin, have transformed sunken cities into thriving centers of their own culture, creating kingdoms that rival surface nations in complexity and power. The Sahuagin call themselves the people of the sea, though surface dwellers know them by many less flattering names. Devilfish, sea devils, shark men, each term reflecting the fear and hostility that defines most interactions between Sahuagin and air-breathing races. They stand upright like humans, but there the similarity ends. Green or blue scales cover their bodies, tough enough to turn aside casual blows. Webbed hands end in sharp claws. Their heads resemble those of predatory fish, with large black eyes adapted for seeing in deep water and mouths filled with triangular teeth designed for tearing flesh. Fins extend from their limbs and spine, giving them incredible swimming speed and agility. Sahuagin society functions through strict hierarchies based on strength, cunning, and the favor of their goddess Sekala, the shark god. Every Sahuagin understands their place in this hierarchy from birth, and challenging that order requires either exceptional ability or exceptional foolishness. Warriors form the backbone of Sahuagin culture, trained from youth in combat techniques, both armed and unarmed. Priestesses of Sekala wield significant political power, interpreting the goddess's will and guiding military campaigns. Mutants, Sahuagin born with unusual features like 4 arms or exceptional size, often rise to leadership positions, viewed as blessed by Sekala herself. When Sahuagin discovered the sunken ruins scattered along the Sword Coast, they recognized opportunity. These structures provided ready-made fortifications, shelter from predators, and strategic positions for controlling territorial waters. Rather than building cities from scratch on the ocean floor, Sahuagin moved into existing ruins and adapted them for their purposes. They modified buildings to suit their needs, tearing out interior walls to create larger open spaces, reinforcing structures that had been weakened by submersion, and adding their own architectural elements that reflected Sahuagin aesthetic preferences. Askarl, the elven settlement that sank in ancient times, became one of the most significant Sahuagin strongholds in the region. Located in the Purple Rocks area off the northern Sword Coast, this sunken city was transformed by Sahuagin into the capital of an undersea empire. The Sahuagin recognized the strategic value of Askarl's location and the structural integrity of its remaining elven architecture. Over time, they expanded the original ruins, creating a hybrid environment where ancient elven construction mingles with distinctly Sahuagin additions designed for their militaristic culture. Based on what we know about Sahuagin culture and military organization, settlements like Askarl would be organized into defensive zones, each capable of independent operation if other sections fall to attackers. Barracks would house warrior contingents ready to respond to threats within minutes. Armories would store weapons and equipment in chambers protected from currents. Training grounds would allow warriors to practice combat techniques. At such a city's heart would stand a major temple to Sekala, where priestesses conduct rituals and maintain the spiritual center of Sahuagin power. Life in Sahuagin settlements revolves around preparation for war. Sahuagin view themselves as apex predators, superior to all other races and destined to rule the oceans. This worldview makes them aggressive neighbors, constantly raiding surface vessels and attacking any non-Sahuagin settlements within their claimed territory. Young Sahuagin undergo brutal training regimens designed to produce efficient killers. Those who show weakness face harsh consequences. Survival requires strength, viciousness, and absolute obedience to superiors. Despite their reputation for violence, Sahuagin possess sophisticated culture and complex social structures. They maintain detailed oral histories passed down through generations, recounting great battles and legendary warriors. They have laws, strict codes governing behavior within Sahuagin society, though these laws extend no protection to non-Sahuagin. Their relationship with sharks goes beyond simple affinity. They view sharks as sacred creatures, physical manifestations of Sekala's will. Many Sahuagin warriors learned to communicate with sharks through a combination of body language, pheromones, and limited telepathy. Elite units ride massive sharks into battle, using them as both transportation and living weapons. Not all underwater ruins house Sahuagin populations. Many are contested territory, claimed by multiple factions, or left empty due to dangers too severe even for sea devils to risk. The complex political landscape beneath the waves involves multiple races and civilizations, each with their own territorial claims, cultural values, and strategic interests. Merfolk represent significant opposition to Sahuagin dominance of underwater territories. These aquatic humanoids possess the upper bodies of surface humanoids and the lower bodies of fish, with powerful tails propelling them through the water at impressive speeds. Unlike the aggressive, militaristic Sahuagin, merfolk generally prefer peaceful coexistence with surface dwellers. They maintain trade relationships with coastal cities, sometimes acting as intermediaries between surface and deep ocean communities. Their society values art, scholarship, and diplomacy over martial prowess, though they can defend themselves effectively when necessary. Myth Nanter represents perhaps the most significant underwater city associated with sea elves in the region. This ancient settlement, built in the depths, served as a center of sea elf civilization. The city's history spans thousands of years, and its significance to underwater cultures cannot be overstated. Based on descriptions from various sources, Myth Nanter would feature elegant architecture, incorporating living coral and carefully cultivated sea gardens, demonstrating the sea elves' approach to working with their environment rather than simply dominating it. The relationship between different underwater civilizations remains complex. Sea elves maintain their own settlements and have worked to restore sunken elven cities, viewing these ruins as connections to their heritage. They approach underwater life with an emphasis on preserving beauty and honoring ancestral sites. This contrasts sharply with Sahuagin priorities, creating natural tensions between these groups. Historical conflicts between sea elves and Sahuagin have been bitter, with both sides viewing the other as fundamentally incompatible with their own values and goals. Tritons add another faction to underwater politics. These humanoids, connected to elemental water, organize into military orders dedicated to protecting the ocean from threats, both external and internal. Triton warriors patrol trade routes, escort vessels through dangerous waters, and actively oppose Sahuagin expansion. Their dedication to this role stems from religious conviction as much as practical necessity. They worship sea gods who command them to maintain order in the depths, and they take this charge seriously. The complex web of underwater civilizations, alliances, conflicts, and territories creates a political landscape every bit as intricate as anything on the surface. Ships sailing along the Sword Coast move through waters claimed by various underwater nations, usually without realizing it. What seems like empty ocean to surface dwellers represents contested territory, border regions, or even major travel routes for aquatic civilizations. Ignorance of underwater politics can prove dangerous for sailors who accidentally offend powerful underwater factions or stumble into the middle of ongoing conflicts. Treaties between surface and underwater nations attempt to prevent such misunderstandings, establishing safe passage routes and protocols for handling disputes. Major cities like Waterdeep maintain diplomatic relationships with certain merfolk communities, exchanging information and coordinating on matters of mutual interest, like suppressing piracy and protecting trade routes. These diplomatic relationships remain fragile, constantly tested by incidents and misunderstandings between cultures that experience the world in fundamentally different ways. Trade between surface and underwater civilizations occurs regularly despite the difficulties involved. Merfolk merchants bring pearls, coral, and rare materials harvested from the deep ocean floor to surface markets. They purchase worked metal, certain types of food, and luxury goods that are difficult to produce underwater. Some coastal cities maintain permanent arrangements with underwater communities, using magic to facilitate communication and exchange between air breathers and water breathers. Based on the political dynamics we can infer from known underwater civilizations, neutral meeting places would be valuable for facilitating trade and diplomacy. Certain sunken cities might serve this function, claimed by no single faction, but used by multiple groups who observe truces within those boundaries. Such arrangements would work because all sides benefit from having spaces where exchange can occur without immediate violence, even if underlying hostilities persist outside those zones. Some underwater civilizations remain mysterious even to scholars who study aquatic cultures extensively. The Kuo-toa, fish-like humanoids, worship strange gods and practice disturbing rituals. They dwell in deep waters and rarely interact peacefully with other races. Reports about their settlements remain vague because few who encounter Kuo-toa return to share detailed observations. Aboleths, ancient and alien creatures possessing immense psionic power, claim dominion over certain deep underwater regions. These massive beings, which can stretch 20 feet or more in length, consider themselves the rightful rulers of all oceans. They have built their own cities in the deepest waters, structures that predate even the oldest elven settlements. Aboleths possess the ability to enslave minds, and areas under their influence become particularly dangerous for explorers who might fall under mental domination without realizing it until too late. Dragon turtles, massive creatures combining dragon and turtle characteristics, sometimes lair in sunken cities. These beings can grow to enormous sizes and, despite their fearsome appearance, often prove surprisingly amenable to negotiation. They value treasure and will sometimes provide protection or information in exchange for payment. This could explain why certain underwater ruins remain guarded, with dragon turtles serving as de facto protectors for regular tribute. The underwater civilizations that inhabit sunken cities have transformed these ruins into living communities with their own histories, cultures, and ambitions. What surface dwellers lost when their cities sank became the foundation for new societies, new possibilities. The ocean doesn't simply preserve the past. It reshapes it, gives it new purpose, incorporates it into an ongoing story that continues beneath the waves, even as surface dwellers remain largely unaware of the civilizations thriving in the depths below their ships. Section 4. Lost temples and drowned deities. The gods of Faerun demand worship, and their followers build temples to honor them. When these temples sink beneath the waves, something remarkable happens. The divine presence doesn't simply vanish with the departure of air-breathing worshippers. Based on what we know about how divine magic functions in Faerun, these sacred spaces can retain their power, sometimes remaining active for centuries after submersion. The ocean transforms temples into something between monument and mystery, places where the boundary between mortal and divine becomes thin, where prayers spoken in darkness might still reach listening ears. Umberlee's dominion extends across all oceans, and her power concentrates strongly in the depths where light fails and pressure crushes. Surface dwellers know her as the bitch queen, the wave mistress, she who must be appeased. Sailors offer her tribute not from love, but from fear, tossing coins and valuables overboard before voyages in hopes of safe passage. But beneath the waves, Umberlee receives worship of a different character entirely. Her underwater followers, primarily aquatic races, and those who have permanently joined the oceans, embrace through magic or transformation, venerate her with genuine devotion rather than fearful appeasement. Temples to Umberlee that sink beneath the waves often become expanded and transformed by her aquatic worshippers. What might have been a modest shrine in a coastal district could grow into something far grander once claimed by the sea. Her priests, both surface dwellers using magic to breathe underwater and aquatic races native to the depths, recognize the symbolic power of such locations. This could explain why certain underwater religious sites associated with Umberlee hold such significance in the complex politics of aquatic civilizations. Worship of Umberlee in underwater settings would differ markedly from surface rituals. Above water, ceremonies tend toward brief and practical, offerings made quickly before sailors hurry away to their vessels. Below, in the darkness and pressure of the deep, worship could become elaborate performance. Priests might move through the water in complex patterns, representing waves and currents. Choirs could sing hymns in harmonies specifically designed to resonate through water rather than air. Offerings would include not just treasure, but also sacrifices, with the specifics varying based on local traditions and the needs of allied underwater civilizations. Not all underwater temples serve Umberlee. The ocean floor hosts shrines and sanctuaries dedicated to dozens of deities, each adapted to their submerged environment in unique ways. Temples to Valkyr, god of sailors, would logically exist in shallow waters, where surface worshippers can still dive down to make offerings. These would tend to be simpler affairs, possibly just statues or carved pillars rather than full buildings. But they would see regular use from ship crews seeking blessing before dangerous voyages. Deep Sashellas, the elven god of the sea, receives worship in temples maintained by sea elves. Based on what we know about elven architectural aesthetics combined with their aquatic adaptations, these structures would represent remarkable achievements. Walls would curve and flow like frozen waves. Columns would rise in spirals mimicking kelp forests. Services in temples to deep Sashellas would likely focus on harmony with the ocean rather than dominance over it, with priests leading congregations in meditations on the interconnection of all aquatic life, reflecting broader sea elf cultural values. Sekala, the Sahuagin's shark god, demands temples designed for their militaristic culture. These structures would feature design elements specifically intended to facilitate ritual combat and sacrifice, reflecting Sahuagin religious practices. The architecture itself would emphasize brutal efficiency, with every chamber serving practical purpose rather than providing comfort or aesthetic beauty. Services to Sekala would combine religious devotion with martial training, as warriors demonstrate their prowess to earn the god's favor. The relationship between Sekala and sharks forms a central element of Sahuagin religion. Sahuagin view sharks as sacred creatures, physical manifestations of their god's will. This religious perspective shapes how Sahuagin design their temples and conduct their ceremonies. Spaces would allow sharks to participate in rituals, swimming through chambers during important ceremonies. Priests would interpret events involving sharks as divine messages, using these signs to guide political and military decisions. Idro, god of the merfolk, receives worship in temples that emphasize community and cooperation over individual achievement. Based on merfolk cultural values, these would be open structures with few walls separating spaces, allowing water to flow freely through them. Congregation members would gather in loose formations rather than rigid lines, and ceremonies would encourage participation from all attendees rather than maintaining strict hierarchies between clergy and laity. The atmosphere would feel welcoming compared to the formal rituals common in many surface temples. Merfolk priests of Idro would focus their religious practice on healing and protection rather than warfare or dominance. They would maintain sanctuaries where injured creatures can recover, teach magic focused on purifying corrupted water, and cleansing diseases that afflict aquatic life, and train diplomats skilled in negotiating peaceful resolutions to conflicts. This approach to worship would reflect Idro's nature as a deity of cooperation and community, principles that guide merfolk society broadly. Forgotten gods pose particular fascination for scholars studying sunken temples. Many underwater structures honor deities whose worship has ceased, whose names have been lost, whose very existence is disputed by modern theologians. Yet their temples remain, and based on reports from explorers, power sometimes still resides there. Offerings left centuries ago by long-dead worshippers sit undisturbed on altars. Holy symbols carved into walls retain faint magical auras. And occasionally, prayers offered in these forgotten temples receive answers from sources that perhaps should not still be listening. Ancient temples discovered in ruins that predate known civilizations exemplify these mysterious sites. When explorers find structures featuring unfamiliar architectural styles and inscriptions in undeciphered writing systems, we can infer these represent civilizations lost to history. The fact that some of these sites still emanate magical energy or cause unusual phenomena suggests the original consecrations retain power even after the gods they honored have been forgotten or have ceased to exist in their original forms. Sacred artifacts lost to the ocean floor attract treasure hunters and religious scholars alike. These objects, imbued with divine power, often retain their potency even after centuries underwater. A holy symbol blessed by a high priest might still function as a focus for divine magic. A relic containing sacred remains could continue to radiate healing energy. A ceremonial weapon consecrated to a god of war might yet grant its wielder supernatural combat ability. The challenge lies in locating these artifacts among the countless items scattered across sunken cities, and then in safely retrieving them. Legends about specific powerful artifacts circulate widely, though verifying their existence proves difficult. Tales describe gems that grant control over water currents, crowns that allow communication with all aquatic life, and tridents that can summon storms. Whether these specific items exist as described, or whether the legends represent exaggerated retellings of real, but less dramatic artifacts, remains unknown. What we can say with certainty is that powerful magical items have been recovered from underwater ruins, and more undoubtedly remain to be found. Underwater pilgrimages represent an important aspect of aquatic religious practice. Devout followers of various gods travel to sacred sites, often sunken temples in remote or dangerous locations, to offer prayers and receive blessings. These journeys require significant commitment, as pilgrims must navigate treacherous currents, avoid hostile territories, and overcome physical challenges posed by depth and distance. Yet, based on what we know about religious practices in underwater civilizations. Such pilgrimages occur regularly, driven by faith and the belief that reaching these holy sites brings worshippers closer to their gods. Pilgrims who worship umberly might undertake journeys visiting multiple temples to the goddess at increasing depths, progressing from shallow coastal waters toward the crushing darkness of deep trenches. Such a pilgrimage would test devotion through physical challenge and danger, with completion marking the pilgrim as particularly favored. Merfolk might undertake pilgrimages to sites associated with Idro, emphasizing community over individual achievement by traveling in groups. Sea elf pilgrimages would likely focus on connecting with ancestral sites, visiting sunken cities where their forebears lived. Divine magic functions differently underwater than on the surface. Priests must adapt their practices to an environment where many traditional components and methods prove impractical. Holy water loses its meaning when everything is already water. Incense cannot burn. Candles provide no light. Instead, underwater priests develop alternative approaches, using bioluminescent organisms for illumination during ceremonies, dissolving sacred minerals into the surrounding water to create blessed zones, and conducting rituals that emphasize movement and song over stationary prayer. Healing magic remains fully effective underwater, perhaps even more so given water's natural cleansing properties. Priests can channel divine energy to close wounds, cure diseases, and restore vitality just as they would on the surface. Some healing spells might even gain additional effectiveness when cast in water. If the liquid medium helps distribute beneficial energies more efficiently throughout the patient's body. Destructive divine magic also adapts to the aquatic environment. Rather than calling down fire or lightning, underwater priests of war gods would summon crushing pressure, deadly currents, and other water-based dangers. They could create zones of scalding or freezing water, summon predators to attack designated targets, or manipulate currents to batter enemies against rocks or structures. The ocean provides endless options for those who know how to channel divine power through water rather than air. Communication spells prove particularly valuable underwater, where sound travels differently than on the surface, and where many species lack physical capability for verbal speech. Priests who master these magics can facilitate negotiations between factions that couldn't otherwise communicate, translate between wildly different languages, and establish mental connections that bypass language entirely. This could explain why temples specializing in communication magic serve as neutral meeting grounds, where diplomatic discussions occur despite language barriers. Protection magic shields against unique underwater dangers. Priests can create barriers against extreme pressure, allowing surface dwellers to descend to depths that would normally crush them. They can purify poisoned or diseased water, creating safe zones within contaminated areas. they can ward against specific predators, making certain spaces impassable to dangerous creatures. These protective spells make exploration and habitation of hostile underwater environments possible, expanding the range of where aquatic civilizations can safely establish themselves. The relationship between gods and their underwater temples remains active and dynamic. Deities respond to prayers offered in these depths, grant powers to devoted followers, and occasionally manifest directly when matters require personal intervention. Divine presence may feel more concentrated in underwater temples than in many surface equivalents, possibly because the isolation and danger of deep water creates circumstances that favor divine attention, or because the removal from surface distractions allows for greater spiritual focus. Those who pray in these submerged shrines often report profound religious experiences, moments of connection with their gods that transform faith from intellectual belief into visceral certainty. Section 5. Treasures, Mysteries, and the Future Below. The treasures resting in sunken cities represent more than mere wealth. Gold and gems certainly fill countless chests and vaults scattered across the ocean floor, enough to tempt adventurers and thieves for generations to come. But the true valuables in these underwater ruins are knowledge, history, and magical artifacts whose power could reshape understanding of the past. Comprehending what lies beneath the waves drives explorers to risk their lives in the crushing darkness, seeking answers to questions both practical and profound. Major expeditions to sunken cities have occurred throughout the Sword Coast's history, funded by nobles, merchant consortiums, and adventuring companies hoping to recover lost treasures or ancient knowledge based on what we know about underwater exploration in Faerun. Such expeditions typically employ wizards capable of water-breathing spells, hire guides from aquatic races familiar with the area, and construct specialized equipment for retrieving artifacts from extreme depths. The logistics alone make these ventures extraordinarily expensive, which means only the wealthiest patrons can fund comprehensive underwater archaeological work. When expeditions succeed in exploring deep ruins, they often discover far more than anticipated. Buildings stand largely intact in many locations, protected by depth and silt accumulation. Most remarkably, certain structures retain active magical wards that have persisted for millennia, suggesting the original builders possessed knowledge of permanent enchantment that modern mages struggle to replicate. This could imply that magical theory has regressed in some areas, or that specific techniques were lost when civilizations fell and their cities sank. Among the most valuable discoveries from underwater ruins are texts and documents. Most writing materials deteriorate rapidly when submerged, reducing manuscripts to illegible pulp within years or even months. However, some ancient civilizations developed waterproof materials, treating paper with oils and resins that prevented water absorption, or carving their most important texts into stone tablets or metal plates. These preserved documents, when found, provide invaluable historical information, filling gaps in surface records and revealing aspects of daily life in civilizations long vanished. The recovery of ancient maps from sunken cities has proven particularly significant. These maps sometimes show underwater geography and current patterns as they existed thousands of years ago, demonstrating that massive geological changes have occurred since their creation. Such maps have guided subsequent expeditions to other sunken cities, revealing locations that modern civilizations had no knowledge of. This suggests there may be many more underwater ruins awaiting discovery, sites completely unknown to current scholarship. Magical devices recovered from the depths often prove mysterious even after extensive study. Artifacts whose original purposes remain unclear despite years of research by skilled mages indicate that ancient civilizations possessed magical knowledge that has been lost. Some of these devices continue functioning after millennia underwater, while others require specific activation methods that must be discovered through experimentation or referenced in accompanying texts. The study of such artifacts drives much of the interest in underwater archaeology among magical institutions. Not all expedition results prove beneficial. Historical records mention ventures that never returned, with search parties finding only abandoned equipment and no indication of what happened to the explorers themselves. In some cases, lone survivors have appeared years later, speaking of encounters with dangers in the deep that shattered their expeditions. These accounts, while sometimes dismissed as trauma-induced delusions, suggest that certain underwater regions harbor threats that even well-prepared groups cannot overcome. Areas claimed by aboleths represent particular danger for explorers. These ancient creatures possess immense psionic power and the ability to enslave minds. Based on what we know about aboleth capabilities, expeditions that venture into waters under their control risk having team members captured and transformed into slaves without the rest of the group realizing what has happened until too late. The fact that some explorers return changed, seeing things others cannot, and plagued by disturbing dreams, could imply that aboleth influence sometimes leaves permanent marks even on those who escape. Legendary artifacts attract treasure hunters despite uncertain evidence of their existence. Tales describe weapons that control water, crowns that grant dominion over aquatic creatures, and gems with reality-altering powers. Various accounts place these items in different sunken cities, with each generation of adventurers convinced they have finally determined true locations. Many have died searching. None have returned with the artifacts themselves, as described in legend, though some have brought back evidence suggesting powerful magical items do rest somewhere in the depths, even if their capabilities have been exaggerated through retelling. Magical weapons and armor recovered from sunken armories often possess unique properties adapted for underwater combat. Tridents that improve accuracy when thrown through water, spears designed to pierce tough scales, and armor that moves fluidly without restricting swimming represent practical applications of enchantment magic. Surface smiths study these recovered weapons intensely, trying to replicate the techniques used in their creation. Some success has been achieved, leading to improved equipment for those who must fight beneath the waves, though the original craftsmanship often remains superior to modern attempts at duplication. Alchemical laboratories in sunken cities sometimes yield incredible finds. Potions preserved in sealed containers can retain their potency for centuries underwater, assuming the seals hold and the containers don't crack under pressure. Alchemical recipes written on waterproof materials provide formulas for substances no longer produced on the surface. Rare ingredients harvested from deep ocean environments and stored in these laboratories offer opportunities for creating new medicines and magical concoctions. The challenge lies in identifying what various substances actually are and determining whether they remain safe to use after extended submersion. Art recovered from underwater ruins ranges from exquisite to disturbing. Mosaics retain their colors surprisingly well when protected from direct current exposure. Sculptures carved from stone or cast in bronze survive largely intact, their surfaces colonized by marine growth that sometimes enhances rather than detracts from their appearance. Each piece tells a story, a fragment of a larger narrative about people who lived and loved and created beauty, only to have their world swallowed by the sea. The economic impact of treasure recovered from sunken cities' influences soared coast politics significantly. Cities that successfully fund profitable expeditions gain wealth and prestige, attracting more investment and talent. Successful treasure hunters become celebrated figures, their exploits inspiring songs and stories. Merchants who specialize in marketing recovered artifacts grow wealthy from commissions. But this economic activity also creates problems. Competing claims to the same ruins spark conflicts between cities. Criminal organizations infiltrate expeditions to steal valuable finds, and underwater civilizations grow increasingly hostile toward surface dwellers who treat their territories as open treasure troves to be plundered. Modern threats emerging from sunken cities concern military strategists and adventurers alike. Sahuagin armies drilling in underwater ruins could one day launch coordinated attacks on surface shipping or coastal settlements. Their militaristic culture and view of themselves as apex predators destined to rule the oceans makes them an ongoing threat to surface civilizations. Aboleth enclaves expanding into new territories might eventually gain enough power to seriously threaten surface nations through mental domination and enslaved proxy forces. Ancient evils sealed away in submerged temples could break free if their prisons weaken over time. Based on what we know about how magical wards degrade, even the most powerful enchantments don't last forever without maintenance. Temples specifically designed to contain dangerous entities or artifacts might eventually fail, releasing whatever they were built to imprison. The fact that some of these sites date back thousands of years suggests their wards may be approaching critical failure points. The spell plague's lingering effects in certain sunken zones represent another potential threat. Areas touched by the blue fire during that catastrophic event sometimes retain unstable magical properties. These contaminated regions might suddenly manifest new problems, triggering magical disasters that affect both underwater and surface areas. Strange creatures occasionally emerge from spell plague-affected ruins, mutations created by wild magic. These beings present unique challenges, as they may possess intelligence but lack ability to communicate, or be hostile through confusion rather than malice. Underwater archaeology has evolved into a recognized academic discipline, with universities in major cities offering courses and funding research expeditions. These scholarly investigations prioritize knowledge over treasure, carefully documenting sites before removing artifacts. They create detailed maps of underwater ruins, catalog building styles and construction techniques, and analyze artifact distributions to understand ancient societies' economic and social structures. This research has revealed patterns invisible to casual treasure hunters, demonstrating connections between supposedly unrelated civilizations and identifying cultural exchanges that occurred thousands of years ago. Technological innovations continue improving surface dwellers' ability to explore underwater ruins. Alchemists develop better formulations for water-breathing potions, extending their duration and reducing side effects. Artificers create specialized equipment like underwater lanterns that function at extreme depths and communication devices that work through water. Each advancement opens new possibilities, making previously inaccessible sites available for exploration. This could imply that the next few centuries will see dramatic increases in our understanding of underwater history, as technology and magic make deeper sites reachable. The future of sunken cities along the Sword Coast remains uncertain, but undoubtedly significant. As surface civilizations continue developing underwater exploration capabilities, more ruins will be discovered, studied, and possibly exploited. Relationships between surface and underwater nations will evolve, hopefully toward greater cooperation, but possibly toward increased conflict over resources and territory. Ancient secrets will be revealed, some beneficial and others dangerous, and new cities will eventually sink, joining those already resting on the ocean floor, continuing the cycle that has persisted for thousands of years. Climate changes may accelerate coastal erosion and submersion, creating new underwater ruins faster than expected. Rising sea levels threaten current coastal cities, and while modern engineering provides some protection, history demonstrates that the ocean ultimately claims what it wants. Future generations might look back on today's thriving ports as we now view ancient sunken cities, wondering what it was like to live there, trying to reconstruct the culture from artifacts and ruins. Peaceful coexistence between surface and underwater civilizations represents the ideal outcome for future development. Imagine trade flowing freely between air and water, with specialized ports facilitating exchange between environments. Imagine joint expeditions where surface scholars and underwater guides work together to explore ruins that both sides find historically significant. Imagine treaties that clearly establish territorial boundaries and resource rights, preventing conflicts before they begin. This future is possible, but achieving it requires effort, compromise, and mutual respect from all parties involved. The alternative, continued conflict and exploitation, promises suffering for everyone involved. Wars between surface and underwater nations would devastate trade, endanger countless lives, and destroy historical sites caught in the crossfire. Unregulated treasure hunting would damage or destroy ruins before proper archaeological study could occur, losing irreplaceable historical information forever. Aggressive expansion by any faction, surface or aquatic, would trigger defensive responses that escalate into broader violence. Nobody wins in this scenario, yet it remains the path of least effort, the default outcome if current trends continue unchecked. You might wonder what role you could play in this ongoing story. Perhaps you will never dive beneath the waves, never see a sunken city with your own eyes. But the choices made by surface civilizations affect underwater ones, and vice versa. Supporting organizations that promote peaceful relations benefits everyone. Respecting the ocean and its inhabitants, even those who live in depths you will never visit, matters. Understanding that history is not just about the past, but also about learning lessons that apply to the present and future gives meaning to the study of sunken cities. The legends whispered in taverns along the Sword Coast contain kernels of truth. Cities really do rest beneath the waves, preserved in water and darkness. Treasures beyond imagination truly wait for those brave enough to seek them. Civilizations different from anything on the surface actually exist in the deep trenches and underwater ruins. The ocean keeps its secrets, but those secrets are not locked away forever. They wait, patient as stone, for the moment when they will be discovered and brought back into the light of understanding. As you walk along the beach tomorrow, watching waves roll into shore, remember what lies beneath. Every wave you see has traveled across ruins and through territories claimed by nations you have never heard of. The water that washes over your feet might have flowed through sunken temples, past forgotten altars, around the bones of civilizations lost to time. The ocean connects everything, surface and depths, past and present, air breathers and water dwellers. Understanding this connection brings perspective to your place in the world and appreciation for mysteries that remain unsolved. The sunken cities beneath the Sword Coast are not gone. They have merely transformed, serving new purposes for new inhabitants, while preserving the memories of those who built them originally. They stand as testaments to impermanence, reminders that nothing lasts forever, warnings that the ocean remains patient and powerful beyond mortal comprehension. But they also represent hope, demonstrating that even in destruction, something new can emerge. Even in the darkest depths, life persists. Even in ruins, beauty endures. If you have enjoyed this journey into the depths, this exploration of sunken cities and their secrets, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support allows me to continue researching and sharing these stories, diving deep into the lore that makes these worlds feel real and vibrant. There are so many more tales to tell, so many more mysteries to explore, and I look forward to sharing them with you. Until next time, may your travels be safe, whether on land or sea, and may you always remember that the greatest treasures are not gold or gems, but the knowledge and understanding we gain through exploration and study.